Well, thank you as well. And let me first commend the, the committee staff for putting together this report, which we wrote this 5 years ago. This is the second volume, if you will, of A Line in the Sand. And I'd like to submit it without objection into the record, as well as a letter that we sent to the administration, to the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs after we took led a delegation down to Latin America to look at the very issues that we are discussing here today. I'd like to enter that into the record as well, and also state that this letter was sent on October the 5th, and we have yet to receive any sort of response from the administration. This is an area that I know Mr. Duncan shares my concerns. I believe, Mr. Cifalo, as you stated, that this is an area that has gone largely ignored, overlooked, and yet it's right in our backyard. And we talk about the Middle East a lot, and we talk about North Africa and Egypt and Libya, and yet there's some things happening not too far from here that I think the American people just have no idea the threat level that it presents to us. And as you look at the tension between Israel and Iran right now, and how that is heightened to a flashpoint that I don't think I've seen as great in my lifetime, as that tension heightens, so does the tension across the world and in this hemisphere. If, God forbid, there is a strike from Israel into Iran, the retaliation will be certain and it will be swift, not just against Israel, but in the entire Middle East, and it will also expand into this hemisphere. It will light up Hezbollah operatives, I think, in Latin America. It will also light up Hezbollah cells in the United States. And many people don't even realize that there are Hezbollah cells in the United States. When I was a former AUSA chief of counterterrorism, that was our job, was to find out, where are they? You don't know what you don't know. Where are these cells? And what we found was that Hezbollah is actually pretty sophisticated, and in some ways more so than Al-Qaeda. They're certainly probably better financed. And so when we went down to Latin America, Mr. Duncan and I, we went to the tri-border area, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, and we saw a huge Hezbollah presence. Billions of dollars being sent from that area, that region, to Hezbollah, to Iran. We also saw that there were satellite nations of Iran in Latin America, certainly Venezuela being one of the biggest, and then Bolivia and Ecuador and Cuba. They were even talking about disavowing a treaty from 1947 that deals with the Monroe Doctrine, where if one attack on one is an attack against all. Why would these states want to violate that treaty or get out of that treaty? It's because of the influence of Iran in the region. So I guess, my question is that we were always told, and Ambassador Noriega, I think you just hit the nail on the head by saying, when it comes to the State Department, it's a head in the sand. Because when we were down there, we got, briefings from the chief of station, which were pretty good. But the local security guys, better. And then we went to the Jewish Community Center that was blown up by Hezbollah. And these guys probably gave us the best briefing that we got down there. Most likely wired into Israeli intelligence, which is probably the best when it comes to Iran. But then when we talked to our own State Department, amazingly how the threat is downplayed, how the terrorism word is not even used. I think it's been taken out of their vernacular. And even though you have this large Hezbollah presence down there, they don't seem to care. It's like diplomacy outweighs threat. Diplomacy outweighs looking at this as a counterterrorism issue. So I think that was, to me, the line of the hearing, a head in the sand. And they need to get their head out of the sand and look at this problem. So my question to the panel is, we were always told, Hezbollah's down there, but they're just finance support cells. It's nothing to get too worried about. So I don't overblow this problem. It's not really a problem. Well, then we saw the Quds Force operative in Mexico, aligning with what he thought was a Los Zetas cartel member to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in Washington and to hit the embassies in Argentina, both the Israeli and Saudi embassies. The first time we're seeing this theory that couldn't possibly be a threat, to suddenly seeing an operation. So I guess, again, my final question is, can you discuss the sort of unholy alliance that we're seeing now and marriage between these Hezbollah, Quds Force, more radical Islamic groups, and the drug cartels that are largely financed? I understand that. But discuss that, and then also, is it possible that they could become operational in the future, particularly in light of the situation between Israel and Iran currently?
If I could jump in?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right. Ahmad Vahidi is the Minister of Defense of Iran. He said if Iran were attacked by anyone, that there would be a tough and crushing response. He said that on May 2011 in Bolivia, where he was inaugurating an academy on asymmetrical warfare that is being funded by Iran. Wow. Just one example, Mohsen Rabbani is a cleric who is wanted for his role in the 92 and 94 bombings in Buenos Aires. He travels on documents provided him by Venezuela. He's not supposed to be able to travel at all because there's a red notice, an Interpol red notice, but he travels in this hemisphere on a regular basis, and we've been able to place him through our sources at least a couple of times in the last 18 months. So that exists. The Juma case that I referred to involves all of these different criminal elements and really a global enterprise where Juma played a role bringing Colombian cocaine to the Los Zetas through Central America, taking the money there, commingling it with a used car enterprise. Those cars, that value was then exported to Africa, converted to cash, so you launder the resources, and then flown back to the Western Hemisphere. This is a terrifically sophisticated mechanism that is going to reach out and touch us in a serious way if we don't get ahead of the curve and start to block some of these moves on their part.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Mr. Chairman, to build on one of the previous questions as well regarding metrics, I think before jumping into the specifics, it's worth remembering that terrorism, what gets measured gets done, but are we measuring what matters? But more importantly, terrorism is a small numbers business. If you look back to 9/11, we weren't talking about hundreds and thousands of people. So it's worth factoring in the vulnerabilities that can be exploited. You don't need big numbers to cause catastrophic effect. So in terms of the Lebanese-Hezbollah marriage in the tri-border area, I think General Frazier, head of Southern Command, put it best. They are working together, mostly alliances of convenience, but it's those alliances of convenience that can cause real significant damage to our U.S. national interests and national security. I might note that LAPD recently elevated the government of Iran and its proxies to a Tier 1 threat, at par and even to al-Qaeda, its affiliates, and those inspired by al-Qaeda. That's a significant development. NYPD has done much the same. In addition to the points that Ambassador Noriega brought up, Nasrallah, the head of Lebanese Hezbollah, has stated himself, and his quote was, "If Israel targets Iran, America bears responsibility." So clearly they're going to light up and tap some of those networks. I might also note there have been a number of arrests, JTTF arrests in the United States. In 2010, there were 16 significant arrests of Hezbollah sympathizers trying to access Stinger missiles, night vision equipment. So this isn't something that we need to be worrying about. This has occurred. So the question is if you see these pieces come together and should a triggering event cause, yes, I think that is a significant issue the United States needs to be concerned about. And I might also note that they're pretty sophisticated in terms of tradecraft. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Mr. Farrer?
Well, I would echo what Ambassador Noriega said, and I think that if you look at Iran's history in the region, we tend to look at the attempted attack on the Saudi ambassador as sort of a crossing or a sea change in how they behave, but it's not really. And if you look at the 2007 attempted attack on the JFK fuel facilities, that was also an Iranian plot. It didn't get a lot of publicity, but the Iranian connection, but Mr. Qadir, who was involved in the plot out of Guyana, was sent to the Western Hemisphere at the same time Mohsen Rabbani was, and he was working the northern tier as Mohsen Rabbani was working the Argentine sphere. And part of the money for that, and it's documented in our own court documents, for that attack were put into the mosque that Mr. Qadir was running in Guyana. So I think they've been waging an asymmetrical campaign against us for a long time, and we are not taking it seriously. I think the other thing that one has to pay attention to is simply the breadth of their activities. Many of them small, but in taken together, they're quite significant. The number of businesses they're opening in Panama, the Colon Free Trade Zone, is astounding. They're buying Panamanian citizenship for $10,000 as Panamanian citizens, then opening businesses in the Colon Free Trade Zone with extremely broad capabilities for acquiring dual use or moving whatever they want through that particular area. If you look at the Univision report from last year on the Amenaza Irani, they documented and filmed Iran's attempts to hack our major national security networks from a Mexican university in conjunction and with the Venezuelans asking for anything that was taken to be shared back with them. So I think that our assumption is that this is all starting now, when in reality there was a meeting in Tehran in 1983 where they made the decision to expand into Latin America using guns and automatic weapons and grenades, fusiles y granadas, weapons and grenades to take over the region. So I think that the idea that they're somehow unprepared or that this is a new thing for them and they're suddenly scrambling to position themselves is nonsense. They've been doing this for 20 years. They're in places where we are only beginning to look to see where they are, and I think the potential to light us up if they felt necessary is huge. And
let me follow up on, you meant this isn't about cyber, but there was an attack recently by Iran, a cyber attack on Aramco in the Saudi Peninsula. 30,000 computers compromised, and at the same time, an attack against our financial institutions in the United States. So it really is astounding, and you're correct, it's not some science fiction thing, it's happening, right now. And then these flights going back between, Caracas to Tehran, what's on those planes, we can't monitor those planes, speculation uranium's on those flights. What if that came back weapons grade into this hemisphere and smuggled across the border? That's a nightmare scenario for a lot of us.
I would say perhaps even more dangerous than those flights are the unregulated shipping, which have much more significant capacity even, and are even less monitored than the flights are. And their ability, because of the state-to-state transaction, there's no way of knowing what's on those planes as they leave.
Just last question, Ambassador. You said you have a lot of friends in the State Department. So given all this mounting evidence, why do they continue to have their head in the sand on this?
Well, I should add, I had a lot of friends at the State Department about 20 minutes ago, but maybe fewer.
I'm sorry they're not still there, but yeah.
Well, they conflate this, Mr. Chairman, with other issues that we have with these countries. For example, Venezuela, they don't want to mud wrestle with Hugo Chavez, and they think that if we do, it elevates him. That's a wonderful theory. 7 years ago, it might have had some validity, but it's been disproven as we see that we try to sort of studiously ignore him, that he's galloping forward at this staggering alliance with Iran, for that matter with PRC, buying $9 billion weapons for the Russians. The Cubans essentially run the internal security apparatus. I don't know what else he could do if we were to try to provoke him. The other thing is there are countries like Mexico and Brazil that are just so sensitive about talking about this issue. And part of it is every time we raise it, they misread it as an accusation. But the fact is, we can all up and down this table give examples of the things the Mexicans have done right in fighting this issue. But for some reason, we can't, I mean, they are not doing their job at the State Department to find a way to have a serious dialogue about this so that the Mexicans are more open and the Brazilians are more open. The Brazilians are going to host the Olympics and the World Cup in the next 3 or 4 years, both events. And if you ask a lot of these foreign ministry types in Brazil, they will tell you the terrorism is an invention of the United States government to intervene in our internal affairs. Well, it's going to come, unfortunately, in the manifestation and manifest itself in another way if they don't do something serious to address this issue.
Yeah, and the Brazilians, when we were down there, absolutely right, did not want to acknowledge any of this. But at the same time, while we were there, sent 10,000 troops to the tri-border area. So it's not a threat, but we're going to send 10,000 troops to the tri-border area while you're there.
Mr. Chairman, some of the best work being done on this is by Brazilian police, by the Brazilian security agencies. But at the political level, it's completely, Sergeant Schultz. They know nothing about anything. And one other example, Argentina, a country where 144 people were the victims of Hezbollah violence, not so far in the distant past, is engaging in talks right now with the Iranians. And what are they up to? Well, there have been vast transfers of cash, at least $250 million from Venezuela to Argentina. We know that Ahmadinejad asked Chavez to intervene with Nestor Kirchner, the former president of Argentina, to turn back on the sort of nuclear cooperation that they had back in the 90s before those bombings. And now these talks are, I believe, to launder the reputations of 2 potential candidates for president of Iran to succeed Ahmadinejad, who are indicted by Argentina. So mark my words, this will involve some sort of transaction, very high-priced soybean exports from Argentina to Iran, and you're going to see Argentina find a way to lift those indictments so that they don't have a black mark against the next president of Iran. This is the sort of stuff that the State Department needs to know about and engage on.
I think everybody needs to know about it. I can tell you, meeting with the ambassador from Argentina was hardly a friendly experience as well. Very anti-American, was my sense. So I've gone way past my time. I'd like to now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.